Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to your webinar for today on Introduction to Commercial Railings and Systems, presented by Connie at VIVA Railings. I'm going to give everyone a few seconds to trickle in here. And while everyone's trickling in, I wanted to let you know about a few things for today's presentation. First one, this is AIA accredited, so you will be receiving one CEU after today's presentation. If you weren't able to fill out the form earlier or provide your AIA number, I will drop that link in the chat right now to receive credit for today's presentation. See it pop up right now. Secondly, there will be a poll about 45 minutes in, and that will be a great way to connect with Connie and learn more about VIVA Railings products after today's presentation. And the last thing that I'll show you is their brand page. So Connie, if you wouldn't mind unsharing your screen, I'll show mine real quick. Perfect.
Got it.
Thank you so much. So if you go over onto Acelab's main website, if you've never perused before, it's a really great resource for finding different products. You can start typing in VIVA Railings, and you'll go to their beautiful brand page here. It'll give you more information about their products. Oh, I skipped it. It'll give you more information about their products, a great way to connect further with Connie here and request more specific project support, as long as there are different products here with some really, really great information as well. So you can see all their products and get all their specs as well. Last thing I'll show you is a way to request lunch and learns and presentations with Connie here. You can scroll all the way down and find VIVA Railings. From there, you can give a little more information about your company and what type of meeting you're interested in. I will also drop this link in the chat to request any further presentations. Now I'll stop sharing my screen and I will let Connie get going with the presentation.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Elisa.
Of course.
My name is Connie Quimby. I have been in the hand railing world for over 30 years. Try to stay up to date on various codes and changes, and we'll go over some of that today. We will also go over, there we go. Advantages to a pre-engineered system, what we commonly see. Of course, code is what we're always going to try to meet for structural requirements, but then navigating through your end user and keeping track of what's important for safety, always in the back of our minds. Plans and specs, best practices, various systems out there in the world. LED railings. They have been around since about 2008. I'll touch base on that. And then, of course, more advantages when something is pre-engineered with safety in mind. So pre-engineered or off the shelf doesn't mean that it couldn't be customized. We're controlling our quality. We want to make it more cost effective for everyone. Architects love to push the envelope. We love that too. I know that getting a hard no on customization or fabrication options is not something that I experience. It's usually a compromise. What we can do to meet your budget, VE is not necessarily a bad thing. I know that architects start out at best. Here, sales can be good, better, best, and we'll get you where you need to be when we know of a budget. Lead times, I'll talk a little bit on that right now. If you're working in hand railing, many people think that hand railing goes in last on the project. It should be an early buyout. Reason being, if the concrete is getting poured or the structural steel is being fabricated, you should have a discussion with your hand railing provider. What will we be mounting to? Those discussions should happen early versus surprises later. No surprises in construction. Wouldn't that be great? So we try to discuss a lead time of about 6 to 7 months. You know, on paper, it may say from your supplier, oh, 14 to 16 weeks or some number, but that is usually after a shop drawing approval process. So we have back and forth in the office that sometimes takes just as much time as fabrication and installation, surprisingly. So you've got the process of ITBs, then a buyout process, then a scope review process, contract review process. And if somebody is an excellent communicator, we can surely go faster than that. But I like to be upfront with what's realistic. Shop drawings can take 2 to 4 weeks, depending upon how complex the job is. And then once those shop drawings are approved, and this is industry standard, then fabrication starts. So discussions early and understanding what's all on the drawing board is a good practice. And then code compliance. Of course, we're always trying to meet the safety standards and loads with safety as the bottom line of what we're trying to incorporate with beautiful designs overall. So code requirements, there is a difference between a guardrail and a handrail. Handrail, think of it like if you lift your foot 2 times or more. So here's an example of a hand railing. There can be some confusion. Sometimes it'll say 4 steps, 3 steps. If you're lifting your foot 2 times or more, a handrail would be required. Now, a guardrail, this is the top of the guard, a little bit different. That's meant to prevent a catastrophic event. So this is for a 30-inch drop or more where a guard would be required. I just had a question last week about having a handrail in front of that guardrail all the way through, and that is not the case. Typically, you're going to have a cutoff at the top and the bottom of the stairs, which is on my next slide a little bit. Height of handrails are typically going to be at about 42 inches for commercial, required on both sides of the stair walking path. Opening limitations, 4-inch sphere rule. We're all aware of that. Kids are cool. They do some crazy things. So think of a child's head passing through there, and do you go a little bit further? So I like this slide because it shows a cable rail. Today, the cable rail the code does not speak to force or flex. So with cable, you're always going to have a little bit of play involved. And we recommend 3.5, 3.25 inches, no matter who you're working with, because kids can surely do some wild things. And railing suppliers can say, oh, it meets the code, but really you want to ensure the safest outcome for all. I also want to mention right here, this slide is good for showing something on an OSHA requirement. So 2015 was a huge code change for hand railings. Typically codes come out about every 3 years. And in 2015, they mention a kick plate is required for an OSHA handrail. Think of a work environment where tools may fall over the side on a mezzanine application. So having some sort of kick plate, doesn't have to be metal, but they indicate kick plate. So wood, just some sort of stop. So tools and safety is in mind. Prior to 2015, you had to have a handrail with a mid rail about in the middle were the words in the code. And then they changed it to OSHA rails need to be 19 inches from the top. So mindful of that, depending upon your condition. Handrails typically need to return to the wall, to the floor, or to itself. You'll see these 180-degree bends. 2015, again, huge code changes. So what had happened was you used to say 1 foot at the top, 1 foot at the bottom, plus a tread width. So there was these huge extensions out into the walking path of a sidewalk, for instance. Codes are adopted by local jurisdictions. They are not written by local jurisdictions. They are adopted and they can be more stringent or less stringent. So I will go into a little bit on how codes have evolved. Codes, back in the day, they were all published in books. We had all sorts of different codes. In the South, we had the BOCA code. Before the ADA, we had the ANSI standards. Then we had the IBC codes for IRC for residential, IBC for commercial. And then the NFPA was trying to come out with their own official building codes. We all waited to see what California was going to do. California adopted the ICC codes. So we all just followed pace. The NFPA on their own separate building codes went away. So we all pretty much followed the ICC codes. When the ADA federal law was written, they picked up some incorrect dimensions, and that is a law. This was back in 1992, I believe. They said that every handrail had to be 1.5 inches absolute. I'll go into that in the next slide a little bit more and how we turn that around. So a handrail is required with 2 or more risers. Think of your foot going up 2 times or more, or a ramp, 6 inches, not required for a slope of less than 1:20 on the ratio. So you might be in a ramp environment with a very gradual slope. I know that the Dallas Modern Art Museum has a beautiful ramping walkway all out of marble, no handrails, and it's the slope that they're able to get away from that. But for those with visual impairments, you would want that reachability. 30 inches of reach on both sides of the egress path, 2 railings for commercial applications. Residential is 1 handrail requirement. Of course, in Europe, I'll see things out online, Pinterest, movies, videos, no hand railings. That's not in the US. So typically there is a railing required if you're lifting your foot 2 times or more. My mother, at age 65, was diagnosed with macular degeneration. Today, Henry Winkler advertises it on TV. You hear AMD out there. I took a class on it because I thought, man, am I going to get this? So macular degeneration is an age-related illness. If we all live long enough, we will all get it. However, lifestyle just has a lot to do with it. So I'm originally from Milwaukee. My mom grew up a block from Lake Michigan, as I did. No sunglasses. She was a heavy smoker for 40 years, and that takes its toll on your eye tissue. So by the age of 68, she was pretty blind, and we didn't really realize it until she was reading birthday cards upside down. And it's interesting because my mom could navigate out in public and fool everyone, this proud German stoic woman. You know, you think about it like a short order cook. It's a hand-eye coordination. She could just reach for that railing and know it was going to be in there based on the standardizations that are in place today for those with visual impairment. Sometimes I'll hear references, hey, we need a cane rail down here, or wheelchair rail, which is meant for those with a sweeping motion, but also knowing where that edge is, if there is a ramp or a slope, and keeping everybody safe. So she went out to lunch until she was 81 years old every month, once a month, and able to navigate around without a wheelchair or a cane just by reaching for that and having me take her around. So it was interesting to see how well handrails and standardization work for somebody with visual impairment. So handrails typically are going to be at that 34 to 38 inch range for reachability. Think about a short order cook. They're not stopping and thinking, hey, I'm flipping an egg, I'm doing a burger, I'm watching this, I'm watching that. It's a brain thing, hand-eye coordination. So my mom was able just to reach for things and get around very, very well. Prior to 2015, that tread requirement and extension, today it reads 1 foot at the top, 1 tread width at the bottom. State of California, however, makes it more strict. So they have this 1 tread width plus 1 foot at the bottom. So there may be an extension. This 180-degree elbow, or sometimes you see an extended railing design, extending that distance for those with visual impairments. You can make it more strict or less strict, and California does make it more strict. So understand your local jurisdiction and what you're designing to. Today, continuity is in play. historical buildings, especially older post offices, I'll see some beautiful railings that have a landing and then a stop and a start for that rail. But in today's railings, it must be continuous for those with visual impairment. You know, you want to make sure they're confident and not feeling around uh, for that handrail and safety purposes. So I mentioned briefly the ADA and ANSI standards, and I would talk about it now. So back in 1992, they picked up an ANSI standard which said 1.5" absolute for hand railings throughout the project. So imagine an airport with all these turns and conditions. So we reached out to the government and said, hey, you have picked up an incorrect dimension saying that hand railings for ADA have to be 1.5" absolute from the wall. That is a grab bar dimension. So think about those who are more frail. You'll see it in restrooms where there's a grab bar, and it's meant for somebody to leverage their weight with their forearm and not have it slip in between the wall and the grab bar. So we started attending these code hearings because the government was not, they said, nope, we cannot change that. We're the government, and this is a federal law. So we started attending code hearings. Code hearings are anybody can suggest a code change. You get 2 minutes for your presentation, 2 minutes for the judge to answer, and then a 2-minute rebuttal. Very, very boring type of situation. But if you're passionate about a code change, anyone could submit it. It took 20 years for them to change that law, but they did it the right way. They said it's 1.5" minimum from the wall. But for many months, there was no tooling. Typically, it's a 2.5 or 3-inch center line from the wall on your distances. So there was no tooling for bracket extensions, things like that. And I know that I was in production control at the time, and bar bends were flying off the shelf, 1-inch thick. I mean, I was like, wow, something's going on. Well, sure enough, it was this condition. And then I'll see brackets out and about. The Austin Bergstrom Airport is one where they have a water jet bracket, kind of rough looking, but it looks like a pork chop. It meets the code. You want to meet your load requirements of 50 pounds, 200 pounds concentrated load. But there was a period of time, close to a year, I bet, where bizarre brackets were being created. Eventually, the tooling caught up. So that 2.5-inch to 3-inch centerline radius is something to be mindful of. And then also, what material are you working in? There is a difference between 1.5" pipe and tube. So I try to educate everyone. Pipe size is called out by an inside diameter. 1.5 ID is 1.9 OD, close to a 2-inch diameter, versus tubing. Use your imagination and think this is fully round. Tubing is 1.5 OD, industry standard. So it's typically that 1.5, but are you working in pipe or tube? 1.5. Something to be mindful of. So the other exception for NFPA, hand railings on an egress, actually has a 2.25 clearance requirement. And this would be for those first responders, making sure their hands and gloves can meet that clearance when they're running up the stairs or down the stairs to save us. So some little nuances, but typically those are going to be your 3 sizes on there. Vertical clearance. The gentleman who proposed the 4-inch sphere rule, very respected, proposed a code change to say that this 1.5" requirement is required because people were falling downstairs. They would reach for the hand railing, their fingers would jam, and we would, and people would fall. And we were trying to claim that typically people who were falling down the stairs, there's a 3-second reaction time. Their hands could be full, groceries, children, pets, but we were not able to keep that wording out. So there is now an 1.5 inch requirement on clearances there. And then perimeter, maximum graspability is something to be mindful of. So it's a complex formula that the wood industry will keep in there. We have these square rounds or an oval, but 6.25 perimeter maximum around the outside. That is the graspability content. So ovals are shapes that are out there that you can kind of feel it. I had a sample at one point that I knew it was off. You can tell right away that feel, kind of like when you can feel the rise and runner off on a stair. So I could feel that graspability wasn't there. So there's all sorts of shapes you can do in a wood profile. Think of that loaf of bread, weird profile, I call it, in wood. So graspability is something to be mindful of. And then if you are going to be doing a handrail in wood, you want to keep that line item open for your finishing guy, your paint guy. Would you want a certified welder doing the staining to match your finishes? So it's something I mentioned to my architects and then also GCs when I get the opportunity, because sometimes that can be missed and it's critical. So with the handrail projection, typically it's a 4-inch allowance into the walking path. However, there is a exception of 4.5 inch. We're thinking that might be for a defibrillator machine. And then with the material choice, typically, you're going to go with some sort of metal for your handrail, and it could be wood. So 1.5 inch standard, 1.5 inch OD for tubing sizes. But in wood, in order to meet that weight load requirement, it needs to be the 2-inch larger profile. And typically, posts are not made out of wood. There are many designs out there where you might see it looks like wood, but there's some sort of steel reinforcement in order to meet that weight load requirement. 2015, huge for hand railing changes. Prior to 2015, you had to have 3 lights of glass and a top cap. There's many benefits to still keeping that top cap in your design. And this would be an example of a top cap. With a glass railing, 2015, all glass needs to be laminated. Polyvinyl butyrol for interior. SGP, Century Glass Plus, a naming convention, which Century Glass sold the royalties. Very rigid ionic interlayer for exterior on the SGP. But once that wording went in 2015, that lamination actually took away the requirement for having that top cap, but we're always going to recommend it in the hand railing world. There's reasons to. If it's an exterior application, moisture can gather where the lamination is, and then you may see clouding at the bottom of the glass. The other reason is glass comes with flaws. Nickel sulfite inclusions. And if a ring or a watch or some sort of piece of metal would hit that glass panel at that top edge, you may see something burst. That said, I was challenged, middle schoolers, I've heard some stories. I was challenged when I first started at VIVA about 3 years ago. And they said that the independent school district said middle schoolers are not worthy of a glass railing. No, no. So I had to go out to 5 different jobs that had glass railings in place for 5 years or longer in schools. And what I came away with, one of them was, they all look great. But what I came away with was Coach JD up at the Allen High School had a condition similar to this. It was overlooking a basketball court. It was a aluminum shoe system like this. And I asked him, gee, were there any incidences? He said, no, I got, 5 guys leaning on this handrail every Friday night. So the code indicates 50 pounds per square foot, 200-pound concentrated load, but with a glass rail that is times a factor of 4. So 800 pounds at the top of the guard. It can happen. 4 guys leaning on a glass rail. When I asked about the incident, he said, yeah, we had a wheelchair. It turned around and smacked the glass and it shattered. So my question to him was, did anybody get hurt? Person in the chair, people on the court? He said, no, it was kind of amazing. It shattered, but it held together. So it failed safe exactly like it was supposed to do. You'll see it out and about on occasion where glass may be shattered, but it holds together. So that lamination actually is a great safety feature for hand railing. Today, code does not speak to force and flex, deflection. So in Europe, it says that glass railings can move 1 inch in either direction. However, in the US, we don't have those particular words. This was again right around the same time. I got a phone call from a high-end hotel chain, and the owner was in town and was very disappointed in their penthouse railing on the 17th floor and said that it isn't safe. It was moving a good 3 inches in either direction. And we said, hey, we were the BOD, but the GC got a VE option with another system. We would be happy to go through a postmortem exercise. So one of the drawings later on in this presentation, I'll show you what it was, but it's a mounting condition. You got to think about everything on what will fail. So we gave good, better, best options, which were expensive. At that point, they're going to most likely have to replace it and budget for that. But it's something to be mindful of. The supplier kept saying it meets the code. It meets the code. It does meet the code. But would you feel safe with a railing going 6 inches on either direction, 17 stories high? I would not. Laminated glass, amazing. So polyvinyl butyrol, that was developed for the car industry. I was actually working at DFW Airport for a car rental agency where they had these windshields testing back in the 80s. And the girls took me out there. You could put your thumbnail in a windshield, it would indent and then return. So that is meant to keep people inside of a vehicle. And it's still in place today. And that would be the materials used for hand railing, PVB on an interior application. And then that ionic rigid inner layer, depending upon how thick you make your glass, it will meet the Miami-Dade wind load requirements, the ICC wind load certification requirements. So that SGP is amazing on how it can hold up over time. Designing and specifying railings. So know that if you call a handrail, and maybe it's over in here more for traffic flow in an open condition, if you call it a handrail, and you're going to have to meet that handrail requirement. I had a library at a K-3 school, and they had all the little kids when I walked in sitting on the floor. Not everybody was 3, or they were very short. There were 2-year-olds running around, and they were trying to corral them within this area. So this was something that they call traffic control, not as stringent, but you definitely want to make sure to keep people safe. Thinking about maintenance and value over time. So that condition with the wind load requirements, that's something where, gee, if they would have went a little bit more in price, you would have had a better structural option on there. So understanding the full scope and maybe doing a design call with your railing supplier would be something to think about way, way early. And then how to call that out in the spec. So if you notice on this particular photograph, the hardware is powder coated. So it really hides a lot. There's a slide later on that I love where you don't even see the posts. You see it's a flat bar right here. It really hides a lot when you powder coat all the hardware and posts involved. However, we're going to always recommend that this handrail remains stainless steel. Better value over time. And the reason would be high traffic areas. I became hyper aware during COVID. Powder coating gets sticky, it chips, rips, gets dirty. You have to touch it up and paint it and clean it. Where stainless steel is amazing because the natural oil of your hands running over it, it can hide scratches. It can change the finish on there and make it more durable over time. So with a little bit more investment up front for a stainless system, you're going to get better value, less maintenance, things like that. So again, that's immediate cost. Up front, I know that many people think aluminum is going to be the best option in a salt environment. However, I actually went to ChatGPT not too long ago, and it's stainless that will age better and hold up longer versus aluminum. So understanding your condition. Is it a salt air environment where you may want to go with a stainless steel option, but then also powder coat it on top of that? 316 for an ocean or corrosive environment. Kids are cool. Indoor pool. We had a condition where the HVAC system was not strong enough to handle the chemicals in the building. So understanding how they all work together, stainless steel stains less. It is not rust proof. So I know that when there's an embedded type of post, sometimes you'll see rust there. If they would just curve that a little bit to make the water run off versus settling within that opening, how critical and important that is, would be great to prevent any sort of rust happening. Specifying your railings. Are you thinking about, gee, I want the hardware powder coated? On the post side of it, I want the wood on top of it, and understanding what all that means. Here we have a little fancy two-tone effect going on, actually three tones, but what you can play around with for your design. Understanding constructability. If we're attaching to an exterior surface, are you thinking about how that's going to drain? Would there be options for coordination, especially for a rooftop waterproof? What can everyone do to talk way early, again, way early in the buyout process in order to coordinate that waterproofing and you're not going to jeopardize your warranty? Understanding your most structural mounting option. Is it going to be steel? Is it going to be concrete? I'll get into that a little bit further down when I have some mounting details up in front of us. Oh, there they are. So typically we're going to be looking for about 4 to 5 inches of concrete, 4,000 PSI. And this could be specific to any railing system. You want to understand that. And if it is going to be mounted on an edge, we're going to look for some sort of steel. Steel is definitely structural and will hold up. Here you notice it's a 3.5-inch minimum setback in that concrete because you have the weight of the aluminum shoe. That aluminum, I think lightweight, no, aluminum weighs 10 pounds per foot on that extrusion. You also have the weight of the glass, the weight of the cladding, if you're going to cover it in some sort of stainless or whatever you're going to clad it in, the weight of the top cap. So that is a lot of weight to hit the edge of that concrete. It'll break, it'll fail. Folks ask, gee, what's a mounting surface you need for an aluminum glass system? Typically, we're looking for about 2.5, 3 inches. At 2.5 inches, you'd have a 1/4 inch on each side that may extend over. You may notice it, but people who aren't in the architectural handrailing world wouldn't really notice that. So again, that's a discussion you want to have. What can I do to save money and make things more cost effective and think about those mounting conditions? So with a glass system, shoe is definitely the most popular. You can hide that mounting condition below the floor surface so it looks like the glass is coming out of the floor. But a post system may be less expensive. And another option for a VE condition. So VE is not something to be afraid of when you're working in with a glass railing. Anchored shoe. So we're typically going to look for some sort of metal. That is going to be your most structural. Fascia mount conditions apply. Sometimes when something's off and you don't have that inside to inside clearance of 30 inches, this is a fascia mount application where there's a sacrificial plate welded to this channel, and then a beautiful plate is mechanically attached. That sacrificial plate can vary in thickness, 1/2 inch, 1 inch, to make you meet the requirements of that handrail distance. So when I spoke of the penthouse with the railing going 3 inches in either direction, this was the culprit. Bigger is better. They had steel angle mounted on a curb. We would have went bigger on the curb, and we would have went bigger with the angle. It was 1/4 inch angle, which created a bounce effect. So it was moving bigger on your angle. 3/8 inch, 1/2 inch, something to be mindful of for safety. Plans and specs. Of course, clip and paste is your friend and your enemy. You want to make sure your words are clear, concise, black and white instructions. So if you go to specifying the Word document, take away as many words as possible. RFIs come through probably every day. Sometimes it seems like hand railings are catching up to the rest of the building. I see that frequently, but those early discussions of understanding what your design intent is and how we can meet that overall. Are there 2 or 3 railings in your spec? So having that mentioned for each one in the spec, and then create a railing key where people can understand, oh, it's a steel handicap rail on the ADA ramp, but stainless steel here, glass there, or cable there. That key helps guide everyone and takes away confusion and creates time. Plans and specs, another slide. So understanding how important this is, you want to make sure to go back and look at your master template. Are there finishes that are outdated or finishes that you're not happy with? Or material you're not happy with? I know Core 10 was going through a huge burst in the 80s, 90s, and it's pretty cool for planters. However, if it's a Core 10 material and screens or railings, will that, you see rust on the concrete. Is it going to bleed over time? Because if a scratch would get on a Core 10 material, it will re-rust again, and you're going to have a little bit of a mess. So coordinating design assist services way early on. So we had a project where the architect had wanted the spacing on the post to be 10 feet apart. And we could do it. Could they afford it? No. So then we got permission to reach out to the architect and try to figure out, why do you want this 10-foot spacing? Typically, handrail posts are 4 foot to 4'6" apart. And what we determined was the architect wanted to stand at a point in the street for their design intent and see all the posts line up perfectly. And we said, gee, could you live with 5-foot spacing versus 4-foot space or 10-foot spacing? Can we compromise? So we went to a standard system trying to figure out if the calcs would work out. And lo and behold, they did not. That particular system was at 4'6", I believe, but then compromise. So on the grand staircase, 4 stories high, on a helix, double helix, what could be done? So in that one particular area, if we went with solid bar versus 1/2 inch hollow tubing compared to 5/8, would the calcs work out? Yes, they would. So we could go with 5-foot spacing in one area of the project, and the rest was standard off the shelf products. So some savings over here to get that grand staircase effect over there. So that early collaboration, avoiding risk and understanding we're always trying to meet that weight load and structural requirement. This was a horizontal multi-line system, and the GC wanted a comparison for price, thinking cable may be a better option. And 4 stories high with cable railing, Little children, field trips are going to be there. Some with disability would be there. And I weighted my argument heavily towards a solid material versus that cable. So understanding who your end users are, could you defend your design knowing that, oh, I met the code, but then also taking into effect who's going to be your end user, and did you design ultimately for safety rather than only meeting the minimum for the code? Very, very important to be mindful of that. So typically post-supported systems, you're going to have a round post, a square post. Those are the two most common. And then some sort of infill panel, which could be perforated metal, wire mesh, could be glass. Here's an example of a wood post, but then you'll see there's a little hint, there's metal in between there. So the guardrail can be at that 2-inch, handrail could be at a 2-inch, but that post needs some sort of metal to meet those structural requirements on there. Examples of cable and multi-line. So cable, again, has that flex involved versus a multi-line being very rigid. We want to be mindful of this. Oh, there's that poll coming up. Submit your questions, great. So multi-line is out there, but then understand that, gee, if there's going to be a lot of little children involved, would it make sense to have this be a vertical infill versus a horizontal multi-line? You know, kids are cool, but it only takes 5 seconds for them to do something and get away from you. Okay, structural glass systems. Again, VE is not something to be afraid of. So typically with a shoe system, it can be expensive, especially if it's curved. You are curving the aluminum extrusion, you are curving the glass, you're curving the handrail, you're curving the top cap. Lots of labor involved to curve that. Well, in this particular slide, if you look carefully, this is a segmented glass system and only the handrail is curved. So that is a savings. So you can start out with curved glass, go into segmented. You could go down to a standoff or spider system for mounting conditions or a post system. Very structural spigot system involved. There are ways to get around VE and still have that sophisticated look of a glass system. Structural panels. So this is one that customization, I've seen all sorts of things. Know that no matter who you're working with, you always want to go to the website for the most recent changes to any handrail system. Continuous improvements should be happening. So this particular system, we used to have like a T-type post and now it's a flat bar post. And I've seen architects take this post and extend it 8 inches into the center of the design or outside where they want it to look like a fin system. The rule of thumb is that post should be about 18 inches from the top. Another good example of continuous improvement, we're looking for customer feedback. So here's an example of a folded panel that used to be folded at the bottom and the top. And then we received some feedback where kids were throwing trash and gum. It was difficult to clean in a school. What could be done? So could we cut away that bottom portion of that fold and the trash just falls through? Less maintenance because it's faster to sweep something up. So continuous improvement happens for all of us all the time. So on the structural panel system, you're going to notice there's actually a border, which is typically about 1 inch. And then when you're doing your shop drawing approval process, can you sleep at night with a half circle versus a whole circle? Could they scoot this over? That's up to y'all. We can do anything, just as long as that border is there to hold that structural integrity. With a structural system, the rule of thumb is you don't want that hole size to be smaller than the material. And typically the smallest you can go on a structural panel is going to be 1 inch. There's other options with a perforated system, which I'll show later, laminated glass. So here we see the difference between polyvinyl butyrol, PVB, SGP for exterior, Now I say PVB for interior, but if you're going to want it tinted, colored, maybe you want some sort of ceramic frit or decal baked on, that method of creating the tint or the decal may require it to go into a SGP application, that rigid sort of process to bake it on and not change the glass integrity. Um, Low iron glass versus clear glass. So low iron would be a museum grade tempered laminate. It's actually got almost a white, you can't tell, but it's a very museum grade low iron. You can see through a glass, where clear glass actually has a green tint to it. You can notice green on the edges of the glass. You and I would know, most people don't know. So it's just a little bit less expensive going with that clear glass versus low iron, and understanding how that's going to affect your design or the room elements. Framed wire mesh. So wire mesh, not too much price difference within various designs. However, I did hear a story from an architect who had an inexpensive U channel. Again, stainless steel stains less. This was an exterior application, and water sat in that U channel versus an enclosed frame. And it had, the whole wire mesh had fell through at about 5 years of water sitting in there. So maybe you incorporate weep holes in your design as well. So things to be thinking of. Sometimes we see where architects want this pattern to go in a diamond fashion. That would be a little bit more expense versus horizontal and alignment. So various things to think about on what can be done in your design, and thinking about that way early. Here's that example of a perforated metal. So many times I'll get a structural bendable application on a structural system, and they want these teeny tiny holes. This would not meet the weight load requirements. It has to be in some sort of enclosed frame to meet that 50 pounds, 200 pounds concentrated load in any direction. Very common to see, gee, can I have this in a structural? No. Could this be bent? No. It could be segmented. You might have an additional expense for added posts involved at the stop and the start, but metal doesn't curve well, or, bend the easy way, the hard way. You're going to see crinkling, or the stretching may cause cracking. So you want the right system for the right curve. So there can be some limitations on that. Powder coat finish options. Know that you want to typically start out, well, I've seen many things. So it could be a custom color. You want to allow extra time. We had an application where architect wanted bronze champagne. Dropped off some samples, one color chip in champagne, two pink, one color chip in bronze, two brown. And they said, no, we're matching this color that we already have. You will be required to tell your supplier, what is the color? What are we matching? Is it a PPG? Is it a Pantone color? They're very good at showing percentages right away. It could be a raw color. You have to tell us exactly what we're trying to match in the industry, and then allow time back and forth. Are you going to take it to the owner? Is there sunlight, computer screens? This particular application with the brown champagne, it was a PPG color paint. The paint was $800 a gallon. Could we get it? Could we match it? Absolutely. Could they afford it? No. But so that paint has to be baked down, and then it's a powder coat baked on finish. Were they able to do it in the grand staircase? Yes. And then they compromise on the rest of the project. So I can't wait to see the sunlight hit that. Industry standard, number 6, circumferential finish. We call it a satin finish. I've heard architects say, no, we call it a brush finish. Number 6, brush finish, satin. Mirror finish, we're going to try and talk you out of that. Industry. It will show every single fingerprint. It will show every single scratch that's out there. So know that high maintenance, you're going to be polishing that thing up and down the stairs every single night with some sort of polishing cloth or material. 2604, most common powder coat finish. If it's an interior application with lots of chemicals, maybe the diving board is, 30 feet away from the railing. But is there going to be a line at the diving board where little kids are leaning on that railing and you got chlorine and chemicals hitting it? You may be better off going with a 316 in your stainless steel versus a 304 application, and then the stronger finish of 2605 on there. Here's a picture I like of the structural handrail system where the posts are powder coated, you barely see them. And on the other side of it, it just looks like a wall. It's pretty beautiful. So LEDs have been around since about 2008. Know that ETL rating is typically for the whole handrail system. We want to make sure people aren't getting electrocuted. Interior application, exterior applications, not submergible for LEDs typically. And you want to hold a line item open as well on this. So think of a daisy chain application where these wires are coming down through the posts. The code reads that a licensed electrician must hook up that electrical LED. Well, we can pre-wire everything and then the electrician is only going to wire it over to the junction box, would be the line item to keep open. Know the orientation of your light. Are you lighting the whole walking path, or do you want it asymmetrical, maybe where that light isn't bleeding over a mez into people's eyes? This slide says typical 3K, 4K, but LEDs are awesome, and that technology goes so fast. It's now available, I believe, at a 2700 up to like a 6,000 or 7,000 Kelvin color with a dial now. So they are really making strides. Your lens is something to consider for your lumens and measurement. Is it an opaque frosted? Do you want a clear lens? So many things to consider. And again, early buyout. How are they going to get the wires over to the junction box? Is there conduit that's required within that concrete? Where is it located? Early discussions. So the advantages of that turnkey system, I have about 8 minutes left. I am going to stop sharing and reshare within our website. We have so many options out there. And let's share this. Take me just a moment.
Let me know if you need any help, Connie, but I'll let you know when I see your screen.
Got it?
Yep, we're good.
Okay. So VIVA Railings, we've been in business 20 years, always continuous improvement, just like any good long-lasting manufacturer. Typically, our website, you just want to click on products, and it's going to navigate down to various options that we have. Hand railings in metal, glass. We've had the equipment around for metal screens, which we call metal spaces. That's been in place for several years, a brand within VIVA. So what can we do there? All sorts of options for canopies. Here's Fogo de Chao with metal screens. And then each one of them should have some sort of mounting condition detail for you guys to see. So we start out, they give a little splashy picture, and you want to hit resources. Screens are typically available in 1/8 inch, 3/8 inch, or 1/2 inch material. And within that, it can be in aluminum, steel, or stainless product. We can powder coat it. We have another finish called CeraShield. This is a lovely option. It is called photo facade. But let me get started at the beginning. So splashy. Customization can be done. This was a photograph from an architect's phone. It's trees, a little abstract, but he liked it. So we kept that design in there. Definitely can detail that out. And custom patterns, not very expensive when you consider the overall comparison on the project. It's just a matter of details, drawings, and then approving of what we can do. We can incorporate way early on a design call, the mounting condition. Is it better vertically, horizontally? what can we do to get your best cost savings? These are some of my earliest design calls where they want to incorporate some sort of metal screen, especially for a rooftop condition or a window box, we call it, one that wraps around the window. How can we keep the integrity of the waterproof warranty? So I have a team behind me where we can coordinate early design calls and talk about that way early, because I know that I had a really great firm reach out and say that they wanted this to stay in this school, but they found that it got VE'd out because of the coordination within there. So every single wall system or handrail has parameters, a nice little table. What's it available in? What are the typicals? It'll show various ways to return for mounting conditions, and then we get into what are the typical mounting conditions. So we'll see a few type of examples here, pretty straightforward on there. But then maybe you have a 4-story building and wind loads need to be discussed. And with VIVA, we have design, engineering, fabrication, and we can own it all the way through to installation on commercial projects. So that's something where wind loads are typically required in order to understand what are we going to meet on there. And if there's any question, we have the ability to run it past our engineers and try to answer those questions early, record it into the project level so that when we talked about it, 9 months ago, what did we say? How are we going to do it? And I know that many times those projects change. So here's saying material availability. I think there's over 40 patterns that are out there. And then of course, customization is also an option. So here's another mounting option on what to typically see. And then photo facade. So this is just done with pixels. It's one solid color in gray, and the holes and your eyes and your brain play little tricks on shading. So looking at this photo facade, you can see the detail in her neck. It's amazing. We take this to various trade shows, and it's an actual panel within it. The other thing I want to point out on our website is this little magnifying glass. It's very robust on our system, so I could type in Houston and it'll bring up various projects in Houston. I could type in the color orange. Looks like my computer is thinking today. Let's go back a little bit. And up in here, I can type in Houston. Maybe I've got to be at the products. I'm sorry. A little out of practice. Products, Houston. Houston, we have a problem. No pun intended. Oh, Putin. Nope. So it doesn't account for typing. But within our system, I can bring up various projects and places you can go see our work. So this is a very popular project at Spring Branch Memorial High School. Again, allow time. I believe those two panels, one is red and one is orange, in order to create this Ralph Lauren red. So understanding the back and forth that can go into some of that. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and double check the chat. And
Those are gorgeous. Thank you so much for sharing. I've
Thank
been
you.
monitoring the chat too, and any questions and follow-up information from the webinar poll, everyone will be able to connect directly with Connie in Acelab and answer any further questions and receive any further information. Connie, do you have anything else you would like to share before we end today's webinar?
No, we're at your service. I appreciate everybody's time today, and we're finishing right at 1 o'clock.
Yay, great job. Thank you so much for today's presentation, and we will chat soon.
All right, thanks so much.
Bye, everyone.